Hey everyone, and welcome back to the channel. Today, we're taking a deep dive into a topic that might make you a little queasy, but is absolutely fascinating. Medieval hygiene. We often have this romanticized image of knights and castles, but what was daily life really like? Specifically, was it as disgusting as pop culture makes it out to be? Let's find out. First, let's talk about bathing. Did people in the Middle Ages just never wash? That's a common myth. The truth is, bathing was actually a thing. Romans had left behind a legacy of public bathhouses, and many of these traditions continued. In towns and cities, public bathhouses, or stews, were quite popular. They were social hubs, where people could get a hot bath, a meal, and even a haircut. So, people did bathe. The catch: they often shared the bathwater. Yep, you and a dozen of your neighbors might be splashing around in the same tub. And as time went on, these bathhouses got a seedy reputation, and many were shut down, especially after the Black Death, when people became suspicious of public gatherings. For the wealthy, private baths were an option, often just a wooden tub filled with heated water, sometimes scented with herbs. But for the average peasant, a full body wash was a rare luxury. A quick splash in a cold river, or a wipe down with a damp cloth, was far more common. Now, let's move on to something we do every day: brushing our teeth. Did medieval folks have pearly whites? Not exactly. There were no plastic toothbrushes or minty fresh toothpaste. Instead, people used twigs, often from hazel or other trees with beneficial properties, to scrape plaque off their teeth. They'd also chew on herbs like parsley or mint to freshen their breath. Another common practice was to rub a rough linen cloth against their teeth and gums. To whiten teeth, they'd sometimes use abrasive substances like powdered sage or even crushed charcoal. While this sounds rough, it shows they did care about oral hygiene. The problem was the diet. Sugar was a luxury, but their coarse, grain-heavy diet was tough on enamel, leading to worn-down teeth, decay, and, eventually, tooth loss. And if you got a toothache, you'd visit the local barber surgeon, who would pull it out with a terrifying-looking pair of pliers, and no anesthetic. Ouch. Alright, what about the toilet situation? This is where things get messy. In castles, you might find a garderobe. This sounds fancy, but it was essentially a stone toilet seat built into the wall that emptied out into the moat below, or a pit. The name garderobe comes from the idea that hanging your clothes in this shaft would let the ammonia from the waste kill fleas and other pests. Effective? Maybe. Pleasant? Definitely not. For common folk in towns, things were even worse. Many houses had a privy, which was just a shed with a hole over a cesspit in the backyard. These pits would be emptied every so often by workers called gong farmers, who had one of the worst jobs in history. They could only work at night, and had to haul the waste outside the city walls. In crowded cities like London or Paris, many people just emptied their chamber pots directly out the window. You'd hear a shout of "Gardez-le" from the French "garde is low," meaning watch out for the water, and you'd better run for cover. This leads us to the streets. With waste being thrown from windows, and animals like pigs and chickens roaming freely, medieval streets were not a pleasant place to walk. They were narrow, unpaved, and filled with a foul-smelling mix of mud, animal droppings, and human waste. There were no organized sanitation departments or garbage collection. People just threw their trash, food scraps, bones, broken pottery right into the street. When it rained, all of this would turn into a thick, disgusting sludge. People tried to navigate this mess by wearing raised wooden shoes called pattens, but it was a losing battle. The stench in a medieval town, especially in the summer heat, must have been overpowering. Rivers that ran through cities were treated as open sewers, used for both waste disposal and, believe it or not, as a source of drinking water. It's no wonder diseases spread so quickly. Let's talk laundry. How did they keep their clothes clean in a world without washing machines and detergent? For most people, who owned only one or two sets of clothes, washing was a major chore. It was usually done in a nearby river or stream. The detergent of choice was often lye, a harsh chemical made from wood ash, which was great at removing dirt, but terrible for the fabric and skin. Another method involved using fuller's earth, a type of clay that absorbs grease. And sometimes, believe it or not, they used stale urine. The ammonia in urine was an effective cleaning agent for breaking down grease and whitening clothes. Large vats of it were collected for this very purpose. So, while they did wash their clothes, the process itself was pretty gnarly by today's standards. The wealthy could afford more frequent washing and better soaps made from animal fat and ash. But for the average person, clothes were worn until they were visibly filthy. And what about personal grooming and smells? Without daily showers and deodorant, how did people manage body odor? The simple answer is, they didn't, not in the way we do. Body odor was just a normal part of life. Everyone smelled, so it wasn't considered offensive in the same way it is today. That said, they did try to mask it. Wealthy men and women carried pomanders, which were metal balls filled with fragrant substances like musk, ambergris, cloves, and other spices. They'd hold these up to their noses in smelly situations. Perfumed water, often rosewater, was also popular for washing hands and face. They also understood that smell was linked to disease. The prevailing miasma theory suggested that bad smells, or bad air, caused illness. So, keeping things smelling nice wasn't just about vanity. It was seen as a way to protect your health. They just went about it by covering up odors rather than eliminating them at the source. So, when we look at the whole picture, was medieval hygiene really the most disgusting in history? It's complicated. They lacked our modern understanding of germ theory, which is the absolute game-changer for public health. Their world was undeniably filthy, smelly, and full of things that would horrify us today. The shared baths, the gong farmers, the streets used as open sewers, it's pretty grim. However, it's not entirely fair to say they didn't care about They did bathe, they cleaned their teeth, and they tried to manage waste and bad smells with the knowledge and resources they had. They were trying. The real problem was the lack of infrastructure and scientific knowledge. Their efforts were often misguided or simply not enough to combat the overwhelming filth of their environment. So, while it was certainly disgusting by our standards, it's important to see it in context. They weren't just living in filth by choice. They were doing their best in a world that was fundamentally different from ours. Thanks so much for joining me on this journey back in time. It really makes you appreciate modern plumbing, doesn't it? If you found this interesting, don't forget to hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and ring the bell so you don't miss our next historical deep dive. Let me know in the comments what you think was the most shocking hygiene fact. Stay curious, and see you in the next video.